So I'd like to introduce Fabiano. I want to talk first about the image protocol.
How many of you have already heard about the image use protocol? How many of you have used it? Or maybe told your faculty how to use it? Great. So some of you probably have already seen this because I have presented in different occasions. So if you have already seen this, please bear with me. I'm going to try to go fast. So the image use protocol, it was basically a website that was designed to give basic guidance to many North American scholars, Japanese studies scholars, who wanted to seek permission to use images and particularly in scholarly publications. And why was it necessary? Well, they first of all devised this image use protocol task force, and Tokiko-san was also part of it, correct? And Koide-san, who are also trainers in our junior Japanese studies librarian training workshop. This was established in 2007, and it's a combination of researchers, librarians, academic publishers, museum curators, both from both Japan and also the North American side. And it was in response to actually the request from these people who wanted to actually figure out what to do to obtain permission to use visual images in their publications and their teaching, and so on. So the task force objectives were to educate the North American scholars about issues regarding permissions of the use of visual images. And then they also wanted to come up with a simple set of guidelines that it would be easy enough to understand in order to actually go through that process. And along with that, they also created bilingual templates because of the language barrier. That was one of the problems that they had in there. So the methodology that they used, they documented a range of problems that were encountered by US academics. Then they clarified the difference between the publishing environments between the US and academic publishing industry in Japan. There was a joint meeting in Tokyo that was held, I believe, in 2008. Yeah, June 2008, and it brought together many of the librarians and all the interested parties, so people who use the images and also the providers of images, like museums, art galleries, and so on. And then finally, with their findings, they sort of like analyzed that and then put everything together and wanted to develop best of set practices for accessing those visual images. So, what are the problems that people were saying that they were encountering were, first of all, they didn't know whom to contact for a permission. There was a lack of understanding on Japanese legal issues, and it's something that it can be actually quite interesting because in one of the slides I'm going to explain a little bit later, but there's a difference on how fair use and fair dealings in Canada and the provision of quotation in Japan work. Lack of knowledge of Japanese social protocols. Sometimes Japanese can be very hierarchical, as we all know, and so sometimes the requests actually couldn't be initiated by the person or the librarian. It had to be from director to director, and so on. Language barrier, problems in explaining differences to Japanese lenders and U.S. publishers because language is another thing, and payment methods and So fair use and fair dealing in Canada, basically, it's the provision that gives you the right to actually use some of the copyrighted material for educational purposes. In Japan, as it's in here, a permission to use images may be exempted from that sort of requirement if you are using it in support of a scholarly work. So basically, you are giving a quotation, and so that would exempt you from actually having to ask for permission. And that's why people got confused, because they say, well, why are all these North American scholars asking for permission for something that they're going to be using for a scholarly work if we don't need to do it? Is it correct? The other difference is that publishers universally require written permission when you're publishing in North America. And also the Japanese publishers, the procedural differences that I mentioned, many of the publishers are actually responsible for actually getting that permission on behalf of their authors. And in North America, actually everybody has to get their work done before they submit their manuscript. So it's all up to the individual to get all that work done before the manuscript is ready to be accepted by the publisher. So looking into all those problems, they basically wanted to address the issues by creating a website that would have some basic information on copyright, and then there would be some sample cases that people could say, oh, okay, this is something that I would probably be in the same situation. Explanation of who the right holders are, and then a set of permission request templates. So this is the new platform that is being used by the NCC via LibGuides. And the image use protocol page, which was also static, has been merged into the LibGuides as well. So the first one is the introductory page. And then you would have in the introduction and under the tab, you have image and the copyright laws. So there's some information about image and copyright, people, what fair dealing means, what fair use means, and the provision of quotation in Japan, so that you have a basic understanding of what this sort of like legal terminology is. So in terms of procedures, there's the several steps that you have to go through in order to successfully obtain a certain image. So identifying the right holders, you can go under introduction and then when permission is required. And it gives you an explanation of what the possible right holders could be. So it could be the copyright holder. For instance, people who hold copyright of authors of paintings, prints, sculptures, illustrations, and so on. It could be owner of objects, so museums, art galleries. Image owners, so photographs or prints. It could be subjects in photographs. So when I went around the room yesterday asking if I could actually take a picture, I was actually doing what IUP tells me to do. Because if I plan to use your picture in some kind of online publication or even print, I would have already had your consent to do so. And it's highly advisable to do because we don't want any lawsuits. And then we have the permission request, the scenarios. So all the sort of sample cases that you could have. So in the first one, as you see, permission to use a magazine illustration as a book of a cover, which is probably very common for people who are publishing their books, faculty that are publishing their books, and they would like to use an image for the cover of the book or inside their books. And if you click, usually the hyperlinks will take you to the actual templates, but which is something that I'm going to show you. But here you can also go by request templates by the type of addressee that you would be interested in sending. So if you're going to be sending it to an individual that you need the permission for, or if you're going to be sending it to a government agency, like in example 2, and those templates are already sort of formatted in a way that it's addressed to that certain type of person or institution that you're going to be requesting. I think probably the most common one would be the publisher, because many of the publishers do hold the rights to reproduce images, or it could be a museum, something like that. So remember in the sample case that you sort of like click and then it will open one of the request templates. In this case, I think that I chose the one that you were asking for the permission for the publisher. So in the first one, you're going to have a cover letter that you're going to have, anything that is in blue is something that you're going to be putting the information of the publisher as well as your own, explaining why you are requesting certain image. And notice that everything is in English and Japanese. And it does also have very extensive explanatory notes about the differences in the publishing environments, like this one. American and Canadian publishers require written permission, so a seal wouldn't be enough, so please make sure that you sign permission so that we are able to bring it to the publisher and then finally get the manuscript published. Anything that is in pink is basically optional, and it's additional information that you could do depending on the type of image that you're requesting. So it's applicable. So it has the cover letter and then it has the request. The request usually tells the person what are you going to be using this for. Is it for scholarly publication? How many copies you're going to be printing? What type of image you will be required? Is it black and white? Is it color? The dimensions and the for digital photographs would be the resolution and all this type of details. And then finally, you have the permission where the person is supposed to be signing. So you're already providing all this documentation so they don't have to do much work. And it's all explained in both English and Japanese. So now that you know what the IUP can do, and it's something that is really useful, it's also very important to inform your faculty that something like this is available. And workshops have been conducted before in Hawaii, and I also held one in Toronto, and basically accommodated to a Canadian sort of publishing environment, because we have a lot of faculty who, although many of them prefer to publish in American institutions, they do have some specifications for Canadian only. So, and we have a workshop overview, so it will tell you what are the things that you would have to be doing in terms of running a workshop at home. It has sort of a PowerPoint presentation that I showed you that highlights some of the issues and educates people on how to do things. And then there's a web guide, IUP web guide, which is like screenshots of things like I showed you, how to use the website. Mind you that we're still in the middle of actually converting everything to this site, and I think that the new ones with the snapshots of the live guides haven't been uploaded yet into the section. So whenever you're going to be doing and using templates, make sure that it's actually the updated version. And we're going to be sending out a note in the future when I finish the Junior Japanese Studies Librarian Training Program. I promise I'm going to get it. And then finally, it's also important for us to actually hear from you and feedback, because with feedback is how we actually improve some of the content that is on the website. And also we encourage people to share experiences, because maybe other people are on the same boat and you want to hear success stories, and also sort of predict what kind of obstacles you're going to be meeting. So if you do have something to share, please do share on the blog. And we also have to say that the NCC does not provide any legal advice. So we're not lawyers. And if you are not entirely sure about some of the information that is here, you should probably contact the lawyer in your university, because they would be the people to go to. And of course, the IUP, the whole project, aside from the volunteers who are actually working on this, is only possible because there was the support from all those organizations. So thank you, and I'm going to pass on to Ito.
Okay.
Oh, my son.